Good afternoon and welcome to today's reconvened Planning Committee. This is not a public meeting but a meeting in the public can attend. I'm Councillor Neil Wood, Chair of the Planning Committee. Before we commence, I would like to outline the domestic arrangement for the meeting. We are not expecting a fire practice today. If the alarm sounds, please leave the building by way of the fire exit through the doors at the rear of the chamber. When you've left the chamber, proceed down the stairway and exit through the emergency exit on the ground floor. If there's anybody with mobility issues, please wait in the refuge area at the top of the stairs where the emergency evacuation lift is located and use the intercom situated to the left-hand side of the doors to call for assistance. The designated assembly point is in the public square in front of CAS beyond the water fountains. I would like to inform members of the public and press that today's meeting will be audio-visually recorded. By entering the council chambers, you accept that you'll be recorded and your image is retained and broadcast by the council on its website and on the YouTube. If anyone intends to record or film any part of today's meeting, please ensure that does not disturb the conduct of the meeting and you only focus on recording those people participating. Please ensure that your mobile phones are switched to silent now, please. May I remind anyone speaking in the meeting that you will need to press a large red button underneath the microphone and ensure the red light is illuminated. This will ensure you are recorded. The meeting is proceeding today on the basis that all members of the committee have read their agenda papers thoroughly and are aware of what they will be considering today. If any members of the committee leave the chamber during consideration of application, they should ensure they do not take part in the vote on their return, as they will not have heard all the relevant information on that particular item. Thank you. So, item 1, apologies for absence. Dan. Yeah, so Dan and Craig's apologies, thank you. Item number 2, exclusion of the public and press. There are no exempt items on today's agenda. Item 3, declarations of interest. I'll start off, I've got an interest, so I won't be taking part in this debate today. Does anyone else wish to declare any interest in an item of business on today's agenda? Steve?
Ward member for the application, and also was mentioned in the first paragraph, asking it to come here for further guidance.
Thank you, Steve. Anybody else? So, item 4, schedule of applications. Based on the fact I won't be taking part in this debate, hand you over to the legal team and they'll be appointing a chair for this part of the meeting.
Thank you, Chair. So, because obviously Chair's not eligible to vote, we need any chair appointed. So, anyone, well, hand over to yourselves. We need somebody to nominate themselves and a new chair to be appointed, please.
Can I suggest Maggie, because you've done chairs before, is that okay?
Yeah, happy to do that, Chair. If other members are in agreement, I assume.
Yeah, does anyone want to second that? Yeah, I think it's fine, Maggie, come and sit up here, pal, if you want.
We'll move on to application number 1, 2500641 FULM, erection of 34 dwellings, amenity space, access road and footways, drainage infrastructure and other associated works, including the diversion of an existing public right-of-way at land east of Hurst Lane, Orkley, Doncaster, DN9 3QJ. Emma is the planning case officer. I'll hand over.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, everyone. So item 1 of your agenda papers today relates to the construction of 34 affordable houses with associated amenity space and infrastructure, along with the creation of an access road into the site. The application site is known as land to the east of Hurst Lane, Orkley, and is defined by the red line boundary that you can see here on the screen. The application has been submitted by South Yorkshire Housing Association, who have a strong track record of delivering affordable housing within the area and are here today and will be speaking further on the submission shortly. In terms of other pre-committee amendments to be aware of, we also have one speaker in objection to the application, Charlotte Tomlinson. Since the agenda papers were originally published, we also received one further objection stating that the footpath should not be relocated. This is a matter that's dealt with in detail in the officer report, and I'll come on to that matter in detail later in the presentation too. So moving on to the application site itself, the site is located within the designated countryside policy area, so outside the settlement confine limits. And as the report sets out in some detail, there are policy restrictions governing the principle of new development in these areas. But what's important to note in this case in particular is that the site is seen very much within the direct context of existing built development to the immediate north and east of the site, which you can see here. And in addition to that, you have Hurst Lane, which forms the boundary to the site to the west, and Great Yorkshire Way is to the south. And all this means that on the ground, the site is very well contained physically and is seen directly against the backdrop of existing built development and infrastructure, as well as what's to come to the immediate south too in terms of strategic development. Excuse me. And in that respect, this slide shows how the application site locationally relates to wider strategic development of Gateway Plaza and Hurstwood sites to the south. And also in terms of the wider context, you have further significant additional built development to the north, east and west, as you can see here from this aerial image. And as I say, all this means that on the ground, the site is not only very well contained physically, but it's also seen within against the backdrop of existing built development, and will also be seen very readily to the within the context of the wider strategic development to come to the immediate south too. So what that means is that rather than being an isolated or standalone site in the countryside, it's actually a sustainable and well-located location for development to take place. Whilst these factors alone don't change the policy designation, they do distinguish the site in terms of its physical and locational characteristics, and that is a material consideration in the determination of the application. And so just to put some of that into context for you, this is a photograph that's taken from Great Yorkshire Way, looking north across the site and towards the existing housing in Whitmore Drive, which forms the northern boundary to the site. And then just views looking westwards across the site from the end of Beckfield Rise. You can see the houses to the northern site boundary again there, and also large-scale built development beyond the western boundary on the other side of Hurst Lane, which is the large industrial building that you can see in the background there. And again, as I say, that all provides the context around the physical containment of the site and its context with the existing built environment there. So moving on to the development itself, South Yorkshire Housing Association is proposing to build 34 houses, 100% of which would be for affordable rent, and that would be in perpetuity and for occupants which can demonstrate a local connection to the area, and that will be enshrined in a Section 106 agreement should planning permission be granted. In terms of the breakdown of house types, these will be 12 two-bedroom apartments, 2 two-bedroom bungalows, which will be to M43 adaptable standards, 6 two-bedroom houses, 10 three-bedroom houses and 4 four-bedroom houses. The properties will be constructed with air source heat pumps and solar photovoltaic panels, which will be integral to the development. Access is proposed to be taken from the end of Beckfield Rise, which has been assessed and found to be acceptable by highways officers. Given the low quantum of development proposed here, there wasn't a requirement for a transport assessment to be carried out, but one was provided, and the conclusions are that the amount of development would not cause a material impact on the local highway network. And again, that's been technically verified by our highway officers. So as you can see from the site plan here, garden areas are to be provided to serve each of the houses, and the apartments will have shared amenity space that they'll have access to. The report notes that some of the gardens are marginally smaller than the policy seeks to secure, but you'll also see that when taken on balance, the gardens are found to be of an acceptable size still, and the amenities of the future occupiers in all respects would be protected. Equally, the layout that you can see on the slide would suitably ensure acceptable separation distances between dwellings, so there'd be no harmful overlooking or overshadowing taking place. There are areas of informal open space and landscaping to be provided to the west end of the site adjacent to Hurst Lane. That provides a buffer from the road, and another area to the southeast of the site close to the entrance. The relocated footpath, which I'll come on to in more detail, travels through both of these areas of open space. And then just to show you the proposed parking layout, parking across the site is to be provided through a mixture of on-plot and allocated off-plot spaces, and there'll be visitor spaces dispersed at various points around the site, as you can see here. All 3 and 4 bed properties are to be served by 2 spaces each, and the flats and the 2 bedroom units will be served by a dedicated parking space each. And as set out in your papers, overall that's considered to be an acceptable level of on-site provision. And just to give you an idea of the types of houses that are proposed here, these have been designed specifically to reflect the built environment to the north and east of the site. The properties are shown to be 2-storey, including the apartments, and this is an example of those here, so reflective of the scale and height and form of the surrounding residential properties to make sure that they remain in keeping with what's there already. In terms of the bungalows, this is considered to be a welcome addition in terms of providing a range of accommodation types, and just gives you an indication here of their appearance within the site. And a further example house type for you to see, and I won't go through each of those in turn, but just to give you another example of their appearance and layout to get a sense of how the scheme would appear, and again very much in keeping with the form and scale and appearance of the existing built development, and that's important to ensure that this site appears as a visual continuation of those developments already in situ. And just to give an example street scene with the development alongside the existing built development, and that demonstrates how it would be fitting in, not only in terms of scale and height, but also showing here that those relationships have been tested to make sure there aren't any harmful impacts on the amenities of those nearest neighbours, and that's achieved by ensuring acceptable separation distances between the buildings through layout of gardens, position of windows and so on. So with those example proposed elevations in mind, these photographs are taken from Beckfield Rise itself, and that forms part of the immediate site context, and as you can see, very similar in terms of scale and appearance to what's being proposed here. And that's also reflected in the types of materials that are proposed to be used through the development. So these images are taken from the applicant's design and access statement. The image on the left-hand side of the screen shows examples of existing materials used in the immediate area, and then the image on the right gives an example sample palette of materials that will be utilised in the new development, and that would also be secured by planning condition if permission's granted. And then just one further photograph here, which is taken from the end of Beckfield Rise, and that's where the proposed vehicle access will be taken from. So the access will effectively be a continuation of this road, and the boundary here will be opened up, and the access road will go into the site from here. So moving on to one of the fundamental benefits as officers see things from this scheme, the fact that this is for 100% affordable rent to be delivered by the Housing Association, providing a good mix of high quality homes for people in need. The submission sets out, and the advice that we've had from our strategic housing team is that the Housing Association have a track record of delivering affordable housing in the area, including in the very near vicinity. The scheme is fully funded, and therefore the homes can be delivered quickly, particularly when compared to larger housing sites, which affordable housing forms a proportion of, where there's usually a longer lead-in time and delivery doesn't come forward as quickly as a result. And as I say, we've got the applicant here today who will no doubt provide more detail around that. And we also have Martin Ely, who's the council's housing programme manager, here with us should members have any questions about that specifically when we get into the debate portion of today. And as we've set out in the papers, the Council's strategic housing team are fully supportive of the scheme in terms of meeting an identified need for affordable housing here. And just to highlight that point, and I won't read this out, but it was just to emphasise the kind of intention of the applicant that's been set out in the planning statement, because that goes to one of the key benefits of the scheme. Moving on to another key benefit, as the scheme's officers have set out in the report, is the rerouting of an existing public footpath. So currently, as you'll see here, the footpath runs alongside the northern and eastern boundaries of the site, hard up against the boundary with residential properties, and that's denoted by the yellow dotted line that you can see on the screen here. And to give a sense of what that appears like at the moment, that gives a sense of the physical condition of the character of the footpath at the moment. There are some photographs here that are taken from the applicant's design and access statement that show it in an overgrown state, and the photograph on the left is more recent, where that's been cut back and there has been some clearance works. But what you can see here is the kind of containment that you've got from the footpath, with buildings on one side and the fence along the other. So you're effectively using a narrow strip of land between the boundaries of the housing and the post and rail fence. And then, in contrast, what's proposed here is to reroute the footpath through the new development, using the same entrance points, but with the length of the footpath directed through the new areas of open space to be created and down through the centre of the development, which is more attractive than using the narrow overgrown footpath that currently exists. And it also follows a much more natural desire line diagonally through the site between the two entrance points. As set out in your papers, there have been some objections to the rerouting, but in planning terms, this proposal is acceptable and is seen as a benefit to the scheme in terms of good design and placemaking. It's also important to note that if planning permission is granted, the diversion of the footpath would still be subject to a separate formal process, a separate legislation governing the diversion of footpaths, and that would be subject to a separate consultation process as well. And that's, as I say, separate to planning. But it is worth saying that the Public Rights of Way team has been consulted on the application and the proposals to relocate the footpath, and they've not raised any objection to those proposals. In terms of other material considerations, I won't go into a lot of detail on this because it's set out in your papers, but to confirm, there are no technical constraints or issues that prevent the development coming forward in an acceptable manner. There are no objections from technical expert consultees, and all matters can be suitably addressed via a planning condition, and that's set out in your recommendations. In terms of viability considerations, I would draw attention to paragraph 7.100 of the report onward, which sets out those considerations and policy tests. And as we've set out, the scheme has been subject to a verified viability assessment, found not to be viable with all policy asks met. And that's also been tested against a 23% affordable housing provision, which is the policy requirement. Again, that wasn't viable. In these circumstances, policy 66 of the local plan must be applied, and this allows for a pragmatic and flexible approach to be adopted. It also requires that the scheme demonstrates wider benefits to outweigh the lower level of contributions. In this case, the clear benefit we consider being the provision of 100% affordable housing, as already described earlier in the presentation. The policy also requires that other options for reduced, deferred or phased contributions are explored. This requirement would be complied with through a mechanism to be contained within the Section 106 agreement to require a further viability exercise to be carried out, so viability is effectively retested at the end of the build out to establish whether any other contributions can be sought at that point. And with this in mind, and when considering those specific benefits of the scheme already discussed, there is compliance with policy 66. So in terms of the overall planning balance, members are aware that development must be determined in accordance with the development plan unless material considerations indicate otherwise. it's accepted that this site lies within the countryside policy area where new development is restricted, but albeit there are some very site-specific circumstances that provide a much more urban context to this site in terms of its physical and locational characteristics. The scheme is not able to provide for contributions relating to secondary school provision, off-site open space or the bus stop upgrade, but this is balanced against the fact there is still compliance with Policy 66 because the scheme has been found to be unviable and there are demonstrable wider benefits from the delivery of affordable housing. Notwithstanding the identified harms that are set out in your report, officers consider there are clear and overriding benefits in this case that indicate a grant of planning permission. And those benefits can be seen here and are set out in detail within your report. So in terms of overall conclusions, noting again the benefits arising, and just to make clear that the affordable housing that would be provided would be in perpetuity and for those with a local connection, and we'd be asking for the viability to be retested at the end of the build out. It's on that basis and with the recommended conditions that are set out in the report that we recommend that permission is granted. Thank you.
Thank you, Emma. We've received a request from a resident, Mrs. Charlotte Tomlinson, in opposition. Mrs. Tomlinson, are you ready? You'll have 5 minutes to speak when you press the red button. When you've got 1 minute remaining, I'll give you a warning. Okay, so whenever you're ready, press the red button and start.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak. I'm a resident on Beckfield Rise and submitted an objection along with many others. I understand the need for new and affordable housing and I am not against that. A new development for up to 1,400 houses is planned for the Hurstwood site, which is very close to this site, and proposals include 276 affordable homes to support the need. However, the site that we're here to discuss today lies within the countryside policy area, and these proposals are a clear departure from the development plan. The Council's urban design team raised many concerns with the first application and notes that this proposal still does not fully meet policy requirements when reviewed against national and City of Doncaster Council technical standards. Urban design has strongly advocated for a reduction in dwellings since the pre-application stage, and the high density is the root cause of ongoing policy deviations. However, a reduction in dwellings has always been strongly resisted by the applicant. Now, I have three main objections. Firstly, the removal of the public footpath. The Parish Council have stated that they would like the retention of the existing footpath in both location and length. As residents, we have access to this public footpath from our back gardens, and this is a current amenity which would disappear. And contrary to paragraph 7.63 in the report, the footpath is functional and it is used by the community. I request clarification under the Town and Country Planning Act 1990 whether this footpath can legally be removed. My second objection is that there are too many dwellings for this site and there should be a higher proportion of bungalows. The Parish Council have also stated that they would like to see as many single-storey properties as possible built in a low density with green space. And the Doncaster 2019 Housing Needs Study identified there is a need for an increased proportion of bungalows. Paragraph 4.13 of the report references the charity stipulation that this land should be used for the poor and old of Orkley. Older people need to live in accessible bungalows. Replacing two-storey houses with bungalows along the boundary of Beckfield Rise and Whitmore Drive will allow existing residents to have more peace, privacy and reduce overlooking and overshadowing of their gardens and properties. Only 2 bungalows are planned for this site and these back onto the dual carriageway, and so this doesn't benefit any existing residents. My third objection is that the site plan in Appendix 3 is inaccurate. Specifically, the plan does not show my 3-metre extension to the rear of my property, and so the proposal does not meet the statutory requirements for back-to-back distances. Having read all 27 objections that have been submitted, you will have an overwhelming sense of the genuine local concern regarding these plans. I respectfully ask the Planning Committee to reject this application as it stands due to the 1,400 houses with 276 affordable homes already planned so close to the site, as we need to protect what countryside we still have left in Orkley, or seek significant amendments to this application, which includes 1, the retention of the public footpath, 2, a lower number of dwellings with a greater proportion of bungalows.
You've got 1 minute remaining.
And 3, an accurate site plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs Tomlinson. Committee members, do you have any questions for Mr Tomlinson? Councillor Anderson and then Councillor Kidger.
Thank you. You mentioned the footpath a number of times, well, a couple of times at least here. So in your words, how well used is that footpath?
I know we've had a lot of rain, but I was walking along at the weekend when we've had some sun, and I can see people going back and forth it from the gardens, and it's very much echoed, because obviously all the residents are in support of me coming today. They just couldn't make the meeting, but it's very much echoed in what they say as well, that they use the footpath. I know in the summer it looks overgrown and there's reports of fly tipping, but it's a footpath. You know, you may not want to push a wheelchair down it, but it's a really nice footpath in the countryside, and it would be a shame for us to lose that. And instead having, you know, walk through a road with cars and brick instead.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, well, that was very much the question I was going to ask. It doesn't look like it's regularly used, but I do take on board what you were saying. Do you know who actually owns that piece of land? Who owns the footpath?
I think I'd have to check. I don't know if it belongs to the charity or the parish council. I know that they've said that they want to keep the footpath, but I don't know who actually owns the footpath.
Yeah, okay. No, I'm just curious if the right-of-way is moved, what happens to the footpath? Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Chair. Mrs Tomlinson, you mentioned about the different types of housing that different types of houses that will be on there. That'll be something that we raise to our housing team. But is it that you and the rest of the residents would want to see more bungalows there specifically?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I understand if there has to be housing built on it. I do think, looking at the Hurstwood site, there's so many other houses being built. Can we just please protect that land and all the noise and the disruption and everything that comes from it? But the fact that there are just 2 bungalows, and the original plans, the 2 bungalows were backing onto residents' property, and then the second lot of plans, they just moved that, and then just they're creating 2-storey semi-detached houses in quite a small space. And it's just going back to urban design's point as well. There's just a lot of houses that they're placing into this quite small part of land. I know 34 doesn't seem a lot, but if you look at the land and you look at the surrounding houses, you do think that's a lot of houses that they're trying to cram in there, really. Whereas I would prefer bungalows. You know, we've got an ageing population. That's what the parish council have asked for, to have more bungalows and to have more space and for people to live there.
Thank you. And just a short one for me, Chair, is so that is something we will ask both the developer and our housing team about. I had another thought, it's gone. I might come back to it.
Councillor, go ahead.
Do we know if this land's ever flooded?
I'm always nervous when you hear flood alerts. I think we are quite fortunate where we are as residents, But I do see, you know, we've had a lot of rain and I do see a lot of surface water on it, but I don't know if it's ever flooded. But you don't know what happens when, you know, building takes place.
I just wish people would put on these planning permissions height above sea level. I know you have flood zone 1, flood zone 2, but if you just put on it height above sea level, then we'd all know, wouldn't we? I don't.
Any others? Councillor Dennis?
Thanks, Chair. Ms Tomlinson, just about the, you said about how the path is well used and it's a green patch of land. Where's the other sort of closest by green patch of land that people could walk close by to there?
It would be over the road, really, with the Hurstwood, the site there. So, yeah, that's something that, you know, we miss out. And, you know, when it snows and the kids play out on the field and build snowmen, it's just, I see people walking their dogs there as well. It's just that nice patch of land that would disappear. And it's the views as well from all the residents' properties and the peace that comes with that. And it's the thought of having, you know, a lot of building houses there instead.
Councillors, do we have any other questions for Mrs Tomlinson? No? Thank you. You can turn your microphone off now. Thank you very much. We've also received a request from Mr Paul Westhead from South Yorkshire Housing Association in support of the application. Mr Westhead, you've got 5 minutes to talk when you're ready. When you're ready to go, please press the red button and I'll give you a minute warning when your time's about to finish. Ready when you are.
Good afternoon, members. My name's Paul Westhead. I'm the Strategic Development Lead at South Yorkshire Housing Association. Following close and constructive collaboration with officers over the last 18 months, the scheme is supported by the Council's Housing Strategy team, and we welcome your officers' recommendation to support this application. For over 50 years, South Yorkshire Housing Association has provided a variety of homes and services across South Yorkshire with the belief that people have a fundamental right to access a good home. Affordable homes play a vital role in creating stable, healthy and resilient communities. When housing costs rise faster than wages, many households are pushed into overcrowded, insecure or poor quality accommodation. Affordable homes provide a lifeline. They offer families a chance to live in a safe, warm and secure environment without being forced to sacrifice essentials like food, heating or childcare. They also support local economies by enabling key workers such as carers, teachers and retail staff to live close to the communities they serve and to which demonstrable need has been identified. Sustainability is at the heart of our proposed development. Firstly, the site is sustainably located with priority afforded to safe walking and cycling routes. Secondly, all of the homes are energy efficient, SAP A rated. Thirdly, we're providing a mix of houses types to meet the different needs of the community, and each home exceeds the minimum space standards, achieves building regulations on accessibility and adaptability. And finally, each of the dwellings benefit from access to private external space for enjoyment and health of residents alongside landscaped public areas. The proposal will deliver a mix of housing types and sizes in response to identified local housing need, including 2 bungalows. Our proposed green infrastructure network will provide for the diversion of public right-of-way number 7. There is no objection to this from the Council's right-of-way officer, and our solution will offer clear betterment, especially for those on bikes and pushing prams, than the existing poorly maintained route. During the planning process, the scheme has been adapted to address consultee and community feedback. We undertook 3 community engagement sessions to help inform and listen to our neighbours' considerations. Policy requirements on biodiversity, drainage, connectivity and design have all informed our design scheme. Our proposal offers a balanced solution on land which forms a logical extension that is already detached from the wider countryside and is effectively rounding off the settlement, being bounded by Hurst Lane, Great Yorkshire Way and the existing housing estate. Consequently, there are no objections from any statutory consultees on the proposal on any technical or environmental grounds. The drainage strategy proposed has been fully reviewed and accepted, and the appropriate planning conditions are capable of being attached to control the development going forward. Members, this is exactly the type of development that local and national policy seeks to encourage. It's community supported, evidence-based, delivers a package of economic, social and environmental benefits, providing homes for those who need them most. The viability of the scheme remains extremely challenging, and without significant affordable housing grant support from Homes England, schemes like this would simply not get built. The funding for the scheme, however, is all in place, assuming we can move forward in a timely manner, and South Yorkshire, together with the support of its new parent, Places for People, are committed to its delivery. The Orkley Neighbourhood Plan, formally adopted in May 23, now forms part of Doncaster's statutory development plan and provides strong democratic mandate. This is a crucial material consideration. The plan was shaped through extensive community consultation and reflects local priorities for sustainable, well-designed growth, and the plan sets out key objectives which include the supporting housing that meets the needs of local residents, ensuring development is appropriately located and well integrated, and delivering a mix of housing that supports community stability.
You've got 1 minute remaining, Mr. Westhead.
The proposed 34 homes directly advance these objectives. In addition, Doncaster's housing need assessment provides the strategic justification in the absence of any alternative land within the settlement limits of Orkley. Members should also be aware that the land is being purchased from a charity whose sole charitable purpose is to help the poor of Orkley. Unlike larger schemes that have come in front of you, these homes could and would be occupied within 24 months. Our development project team is already in place and discussion with contractors underway. The homes will be owned by the Housing Association and rented in perpetuity at affordable rents as dictated by Homes England. We're proposing all ground maintenance and service charges will be inclusive and not in addition to any rent. And this, coupled with the quality of build and energy efficiency proposed, makes them truly affordable. Approving this application will help secure a more balanced, inclusive and sustainable future for Orkley. Your support would be welcomed. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Westhead. Panel members, I don't know who put their hands up in what order, so I'll go with Rob, then Councillor Anderson, Councillor Cox, then Councillor Dennis will go in that order. Yep, go for it. Work your way down.
One of the stipulations from the John Toote charity is to assist the old of Orkley. 2 bungalows. How are they going to achieve that?
Our job as a housing association is to meet the local need and the local requirement of a mix of housing, Councillor. The John Toote charity own a piece of land of which the capital receipt that we will be purchasing it from can then be used for the poor of Orkley and the aged of Orkley. How the charity uses the capital receipt is a benefit to the people of Orkley. The delivery of 34 affordable houses is for the benefit of people of Orkley. It's a win-win scenario for all parties for the village.
Thank you. Is the access road adopted yet?
Not to my knowledge, Councillor. There is an issue. They're awaiting something to do with the trees on Beckfield Drive.
Has the drainage been adopted?
The drainage will be adopted at the same time as the roads, Councillor. And from my understanding is that the maintenance period is now beyond its 12-month period and therefore adoption should have taken place. That the highways officers are purely waiting for some information with regards to the trees that sit within the highway area.
Has there been any flooding on your existing estate off Elm and all round there?
With regard on the top end, I couldn't comment on that, Councillor. I'm not aware of that, but that's not to say it hasn't happened. That's not in my remit. I've not been long with the Housing Association myself.
Sorry, but they have flooded several times, and the pumping station's broken.
I'll take that back and attend to it. We under our consultation period, a consultation process that we took with both existing our residents and with the wider community, that was not a matter that was raised.
Is that all, Councillor Cox? Yeah? Yeah. Councillor Dennis?
Thanks, Chair. Mr Westhead, could you provide evidence about your assertion that the application is community supported?
Sorry, Councillor, to be what supported?
The application is community supported.
All I can say, Councillor, is that the residents on Beckfield Drive are clearly not in support of the application. They did not particularly want housing on that piece of land, nor did they want affordable housing on that piece of land. We had significant support from a wider community, including many of our residents that are further up the road who would like to potentially have the opportunity to move there. The site that we currently own up the road is a former MOD site, and all the house types are of one particular form. So you have people who are under occupying and people who are over occupying. Hence, the mix of housing that this scheme brings forward accommodates a range of people who are already in the immediate community and who would like a different style or nature of housing to meet their particular needs, which is why that we haven't put 15 bungalows on it, which for any developer is a major. This is a significantly problematic site from a viability point of view. A bungalow is a hungry piece of land format, and to put many more on, again, just worsens the viability of it. I'm not disputing we don't need more bungalows. We all need more bungalows. But in this instance, we've found the opportunity of putting 2 on there. We'd like to have put more.
I'm pretty aware of the other estate you've got on there. I've done up there a few times myself, and I know that it's quite spacious, the land that occupies. The properties aren't that crammed together, whereas from the plans, these appear to be quite crammed together, the non-bungalows. And I think it was mentioned in the application briefing that the gardens, some of them can be a bit small as well. So I appreciate that specifically the residents on your existing estate just up the road might be supportive of the application. However, you did say in your preamble that the application is community supported. We've got a resident from the community who's clearly not in support, and also the parish council representation says that they're in agreement about retaining the footpath and having single-storey properties on there. So I don't necessarily feel it's accurate to say that the application is community supported, regardless of the benefits it does provide to your existing residents elsewhere.
Councillor Kidger.
Yes, thank you, Chair. From the questions that's been asked and your responses, I do get the feeling, and it's a feeling I get with many applications. You've mentioned viability. Would it be correct that 34 properties is the minimum amount of properties you would need to make it commercially viable? And when you're saying the mix of property is what is required, it is what is required by yourself to make it viable rather than what the community would like or need.
Every scheme, councillor, has its own issues in terms of testing viability. 34 isn't necessarily a key number to make it viable or not viable. The reality is that even if you had 40 or 44, the viability would be a test. If you took it down into the 20s, it would be a test. If you took it down to a number of bungalows, it would be a test.
Could you just explain that further?
The cost of a house, the cost to build a house, councillor, is not much different than the value of the house. The rental that is achieved from the house isn't necessarily achieving a return beyond 40 or 50 years. So creating another house doesn't dramatically improve the viability. And house by house alters the rent that you're able to achieve under strict Homes England rules, okay, as to what you can charge. So the mix of the housing that is currently proposed in this application is specifically identified to meet the needs of the community that we have identified through that consultation process. It's not because that's not being driven by a viability argument.
Okay, so if I understand you correctly, what you're saying, there is no need to build 34 properties. You could build 25 or 20 and it would still be commercially viable. And it would be, well, this is what you've just told me. You know, why bang 30 odd properties close together with small gardens? You know, there's obviously a need, as you've said, for bungalows. Now, I take on board bungalows have generally a wider footprint. So put 20 bungalows on, because you've just said the viability would not be affected.
Sorry, Councillor, if I've been misunderstood. A bungalow will be less viable than a 2-bedroomed house or a 3-bedroomed house or a 4-bedroomed house, simply because it's taking up more land than you could. So the land has a value, no matter whether we put one house on it or we put 40 houses on it. It's got a value to it. Okay, the infrastructure that you put into the land, the roads, the drainage, the everything else has a sunken cost into the development. So the fewer houses you then put on that site, the less viable it will be, because each house has to absorb more cost from the land and the infrastructure and everything else. We set out on our discussions with officers at a number higher than 34, and we worked that down to a figure that was acceptable from distances and on mix and type and so forth. There's a number of considerations as to how we've got to 34. 34 isn't a magical number. It's identifying the type and need, etc., etc. So where we've got to is that the mix meets our analysis of housing need and what we can deliver for Orkley. And whilst there will be other affordable houses that come forward as part of other developments, they're not going to come forward for quite some time. They might be at the back end of certain planning permissions, and these can be physically occupied before anything in Hurstwood was probably even started. So it's an opportunity to accommodate the need of the local community from a housing perspective here and now.
Yeah, thank you. Just one more question. I'm curious, what does the inclusion of heat pumps and solar panels have on the viability? What proportion of the cost does that incur?
I can't tell you what proportion of the cost. It has an additional cost. However, there is a move away from the gas industry across all social housing, and therefore to achieve the appropriate efficiency of a house to minimise fuel poverty for those living in there, the most efficient system that is currently looked at is to provide this mix of solar panels on the roof and an air source. And this is because we're not Barratt or anybody else who's going to sell it, and 2 years later we're not really, after the first sale, we're not interested in it. We're looking after these in perpetuity. These are homes that for the benefits of local people, and we have to put them into the most efficient way of minimising people's costs when they're living there.
Yeah, but you do concede that has an effect on viability.
It has a higher cost of delivery, so yes, sir.
Thank you very much.
I'm going to bring in Councillor Coxton, Councillor Dennis.
Thank you, Chair. First, I won't want to say anymore, but I did find your comment about the residents, and same as Councillor Dennis has said, that people don't want a development on that site. I think you're actually wrong. It just needs to be the right development. And I know that conversations were had about the entrance in and out, and it potentially going on to Hurst Lane. I'm sure that there's people in here that have had comments with other councillors about that entrance. Conversations seem to have disappeared. Emails disappeared. Why? Do you not know? I'm assuming you do. But then there's quite a few. You keep saying that it's something that community supports. Obviously, they don't. And that's been put through lots of different avenues. Through a need for bungalows, through all kinds of things. But I'm lost. You've contradicted yourself in your last statement. about how many properties are on there. You've obviously been squeezed down and squeezed down and squeezed down until you've got to somewhere that is fitting the officers more than it's fitting the community. When you look at parking on your current estate, and the people, I'm sure you're aware, even though you've not been there a long time, a lot of residents have had trouble on there dealing with cars that parked for the airport, as do the residents of Pembridge Park. How do you tend to deal with that? Or is it, oh, we'll see what happens when it turns up? You also know that some residents on there have damaged vehicles that have been parked. How are you going to deal with that? There's all of these different issues that you don't seem to be addressing. But there's also when you mentioned the Oakley plan, how many properties were mentioned in the expansion of Oakley Village at that time? Because they've already got another God knows how many over the road. And I'm blown away. Thank you.
I think there were quite a few questions there in succession. So there was one around parking issues. There was one around... Sorry, Steve, I've forgotten now. Those questions around parking. There was a question around community support and how we can evidence what that level of community support is, because that has been mentioned a couple of times. And was there anything else that you... Yeah, and issues around, again, around parking, and will there be some kind of permitted scheme in place, I'm assuming, is what Councillor Cox is trying to ask, to prevent people parking for the airport. So if you could answer those. Yeah. We'll go with those three to start with, Councillor Cox.
Right. All I can say, Councillor, is that the parking, first of all, the parking provision on the proposed site meets officers' requirements. Most of those parking will be on plot, so people's driveways, etc., just as there is with regards to the adjacent estate. And there'll be one or two visitors' spaces. In terms of how we manage that when the airport reopens, that hasn't been specifically identified, but we're not creating an additional car parking area for people to, in no different way than the rest of the estate is controlled in that regard. So we've not at this moment in time made provision for the airport reopening and people utilising it for dumping a car while they go on a flight. But that's no different to other parts. And as I say, most of the parking, the vast majority of the parking is physically on plot. In terms of the Hurst Lane position, we were advised right at the beginning of consultation that access off Hurst Lane was not something that highways would support. Hence, we pursued the Beckfield Drive access, which has been clearly designed to run an accessible and an adoptable road right to the entrance of the site. And that was the method that we were told we must follow in terms of access. And that is what we have done. So on the premise that the roads on Beckfield are adopted, and should have been by now, but will be adopted certainly by the time we've completed this development, should it be approved, then that is the proposed method, and there are no comments or objections from the highways on that position. With regards to the question about community support, all I can say is what I've already said. We held 3 consultations. We have had support from people in the community, and we have had objections from people in the community. And I understand that. It's an open and democratic world. There are no affordable homes on the adjacent estate, and most of the objections that we took verbally at the time objected to the principle of affordable homes of whatever nature at the end of their driveway. That is not a planning consideration, and we didn't take it as such. The reality is that this is an opportunity to deliver 34 more affordable homes for the people of Oakley in an appropriately located position, and we are seeking consent for that.
Thank you. there are no affordable homes on which estate? On Pembridge Park?
On the area adjacent to our estate. I'm sure there are within Pembridge Park itself.
Well, yeah, that's the area adjacent to your estate that has affordable properties on it. The other one was about the Oakley Point, the numbers of properties recommended for Oakley. I think it's gone bust. I think they've gone bust on the amount of properties. So again, I'm lost because that breaches other things, I think, in numbers of properties that should, or buildings that should be within an area. The other one is that I'm assuming, well, I believe it to be right, that the drainage coming from the new estate, the one that were recently passed, is also going to go into that junction just off that roundabout, which is where I believe, you know, your adopted road going in. So there's a lot of drainage and services going onto that junction. How is yours going to add to it? Is your calculations been done with what's going to go in? Have all those been done, and where can we see them? The other one, sorry, is when you're talking about the entrance in and out of the development, was it a telephone conversation or do you have the emails? Because what we had been told is it was a telephone conversation and nobody seems to be able to find the correct information, which I find very strange.
I couldn't tell you, Councillor, in terms of whether it was a phone conversation or it was followed up by emails and so forth. We were just advised it would be easier for us. We'd be fine. We would have no problem in designing it in such a way that Hurst Lane was the primary access point. That wouldn't have been a problem to us. But right from the beginning, we were told that that wasn't an option to us, and hence the process is. And equal, so, you know, our whole transportation layout and process has been assessed by officers and accepted and approved. All our drainage proposals have been submitted and accepted and approved. And so forth. So we have tried and worked with officers throughout this whole process to meet all the statutory requirements of what this is. If someone had said, oh, you could come in and out from Hurst Lane, then we could come in and out from Hurst Lane, but that wasn't what we were advised, and we've not in any shape or form designed it in that capacity.
Councillor Dennis, did you have another question, or was it Councillor Kidger? I can't remember now. Both of you, maybe.
Thanks, Chair. I wanted to come back to viability, and I want, this is for our information really, because it's a housing association that's doing the development. Do you have other developments where viability isn't an issue and you're able to stump up the funds for school places, green space provision, biodiversity, that sort of thing? Or because of the nature of it being a housing association, you wouldn't ever have the capital from the sales to go towards that? Could you just provide more information on that element?
Again, what I can say, Councillor, is that, and let me talk more widely than just South Yorkshire for a second, is that there in a majority of instances, the requirement to provide what you would normally see as contributions to education, etc., are either don't occur or are waived when affordable housing comes along, because the cost of delivering the affordable housing doesn't provide the net surplus that a house builder would seek. A house builder won't do a transaction unless it's making a next return for its shareholders. A housing association is a charity. It doesn't pay anybody out any profits. It rechurns those monies to build more houses, to repair those houses, to provide services to the communities that it serves. And therefore, the ability for, in this instance, is that we've shown that effectively this makes a loss. So normally it wouldn't happen. Therefore, we're not in a position to provide educational position. Equally, your two bungalows are highly unlikely to be occupied by people with children of that age. The maisonettes are unlikely to be occupied by people who have got children. The houses quite possibly will. but you'd like to also think that the majority of those houses will be occupied by people already living in the vicinity but in appropriate housing, so therefore those children are already in the school system, or alternatively people who are coming into the area with a very strong Orkley connection, because that is a condition of the a consent that if it was to be approved. So it's also a case of understanding what that viability looks like and what's the balance between asking for contributions which is only just going to make a position worse. But again, the authority has caught that effectively by going, if it ends up looking better than it did, are you prepared to make a contribution? And again, as a charitable entity, we would do that. All the monies that a housing association creates goes back into the communities it serves.
Thank you, and that is helpful information. So in that regard, if I bring it back to the development and saying about the number of properties and the makeup of the properties, is it the 34 properties of this mix is the minimum amount that can be built, and for the revenue of that to outweigh the cost of purchasing the land from the charity?
For every, I think one of your colleagues suggested earlier that obviously if you did 40 or 44, then it's a better position. If you do 24, it's a worse position. So because of the sunken cost of capital and infrastructure, etc., then every house that you're not building, the other houses have to absorb more of that sunken cost, and therefore the viability worsens. But as I say, 34 isn't a magical number. We're still loss-making at 34. If you make it 30, we'll be more loss-making. And I don't know what the figure would be to get it to something that broke even or was positive. I don't know what that figure is because we don't model in that capacity. So it is simply a case that having worked really hard with officers on design and positioning, I think Charlotte's comments earlier about moving the bungalows, it wasn't we chose to move the bungalows. The way that certain things happened, including the road alignment, meant that we ended up having to move the bungalows. But it was a kind of, could we retain the bungalows? Yes, we've managed to retain them. We've worked really hard to achieve the mix and the opportunity to deliver what we feel is an appropriate number of homes that officers have now agreed on a layout, which has taken quite some time to achieve, okay, and fulfil and tick all the boxes that met their recommendation for approval.
Last one for me, Chair, thank you. Again, very helpful with that. And this doesn't require a response. It's more for us as the committee then to take the information you provided and the plan that's here that obviously has got a lot of officer input into it and a lot of the analysis work into what properties are needed and how to configure them versus the residents' views that there's only 2 bungalows, where are the rest of the bungalows? Where's more green space provision? Where's the parking going to be, sort of thing? So that's where we got to balance it. And if we, as a committee, felt, oh no, we prefer it to be 28 properties with more bungalows, and how would we? There's no real mechanism for saying, actually, go back, redraw the plans, bring it down to 28. We've got to decide yes or no whether it goes ahead or not. And so that's a headache for us as committee members, because in my view, the properties are too cramped together and there should be a wider mix, a larger number of bungalows, but we can't say that. I can't say that without rejecting it. So that's the contention I've got in my head. Yeah, thank you for that. Oh,
Could I just come back on that? And whilst every community in every location will always tell you it would like more bungalows, and I don't disagree with that principle, okay? But this is a relatively small piece of land, and it is not necessarily right that there should be bungalows. That might be your view. How many bungalows in the first phase of Hurstwood are coming forward, where you've got, theoretically, 1,100 homes? and I know only 200 are coming forward or 280 are coming forward in the initial stages, but how many of those, so of the 69 that I've actually bid on for Hurstwood, because I'll happily take the other 69 that's coming along there, how many of those are bungalows? Because at the moment in time, you've got an outline application in front of you, and when it comes to you in full detail, okay, how many bungalows will there be? Well, at the moment, I can tell you there's not one on the Hurstwood site. So well, it's got masses of land. So that's not to say that it's right, it's wrong, it's whatever, but the people who are buying that first chunk of land from Peel, okay, are already designing the full detail of it, okay, and what will be affordable. And I've seen those plans because I've bid on them. So I can tell you that it's not, we all want more bungalows, but is it right for any one individual to be saying that should be 10 bungalows or whatever? We're trying to provide a mix for a wider community than just people who are over a particular age or particular need for a bungalow. We've done our best to provide two, sir.
Just one or two questions from me. Maybe not a planning matter, but it'll just give the committee a better holistic view of what's going on. So what would be the affordable rent, you imagine, of the houses which are going to be put on there potentially if the planning application was approved? And what does that compare to local rental costs, and how much more affordable does it make it for the people who potentially will be living there?
I couldn't give you a figure, Chair, just off the top of my head, but what we tend to do is ensure that the affordable rent doesn't exceed the local housing levels, so, and that is set by government. So it's definitively, and that would certainly be below 80% of market rent. It's probably nearer 70% of market rent.
So it'd be substantially lower than what the rent there is. And I had another question. I think one of the councillors asked it earlier on possibly, and it's not been answered. It was around the footpath. Did someone raise a question about the footpath? Was it ownership of the footpath? Yeah, I mean, I don't know if you're able to answer that. It was a question which Councillor Kidge had put forward around ownership of the existing footpath. And
well, if we were to buy the land, then the land of the footpath would become ours. What I would like to just bring into context on the footpath, councillors, is that first of all, for part of the year, certainly this time of year when it's not overgrown, it's accessible. Of course it is. However, before the estate, the Barrett estate and the Taylor Wimpey estate was built, that ran through an open field. That footpath ran forever. It's now broken at the Great Yorkshire Way. It's got a close boarded fence where the Barrett estate or the Taylor Wimpey estate runs. And if we were to theoretically retain that, you'd have another close boarded fence. So you'd be walking down, no, there wouldn't be any countryside. You'd be walking down two fence lines, because one fence line is already in existence for the house owners that are existing, and there would have to be another fence line for the new houses. So you're walking down a unsafe, unlit, potentially unmaintained, although that would be our responsibility, whereas whoever's responsibility it is now. Whereas, even today, you can't ride a bike down it, you can't push a pram down it. We're providing a much more, we're producing significant betterment by opening up that footpath, taking it from the existing point where it comes into the estate to the existing point where it leaves the estate. And yes, okay, there will be an area where it will go onto a pavement, but you're going from A to B, which is a relatively short space. And the alternative is to walk between two close boarded fences, which frankly doesn't achieve anything for anybody. So hence there is no objection from the officers as to this, and in actual fact on the thing, it is a betterment than what we're providing for the community.
thank you, Mr. Westhead. I don't think there's any. Councillor Anderson.
Yeah, just on the parking, did I hear it right earlier? The two-bed apartments will only have one parking space. Is that, yeah.
Yes, that's correct.
And you talked about visitor parking spaces. How many of them will there be?
I think there's 5, but Emma might be able to confirm.
There'll be questions, there'll be other bits of information which Emma will be able to give, I'm sure, that she's picked up on, which the developer's not been able to answer. Any other questions? No. Thank you, Mr. Westhead. Thank you for your time. Emma or any of the officers, are there any matters of fact or any bits of information that you'd like to provide?
Thank you, Chair. I will come back to Councillor Anderson's question about the visitor parking. My eyes aren't letting me see that in a lot of detail, so I need to do some zooming, and I'll let you know shortly. Councillor Dennis just a moment ago rather stole my thunder around preferences and what people might quite like to see on this site versus what we're confronted with through this application. And as members will be aware, we must assess the scheme that's in front of us today. So it's not within our gift to think about what numbers we might like to see there, whether or not we'd like to see more bungalows or the footpath remaining in its existing location, or how the site might be accessed. All of those are fixed and there for determination today. What I would also say is there was quite a lot of discussion around what evidence there was of community support for the proposals. There's nothing in policy terms that require applicants to demonstrate there's community support for a proposal, but rather that all of the material considerations are dealt with and the policy requirements are met. So do have that in your minds as you go through debate. So there was a fair bit, so let me just bear with me a moment. There was a question about management of on-site parking, because people might choose to park cars and then go off and do other things. That wouldn't be a material consideration for us today. That's a matter for the management company or the housing association to manage themselves, but not one for us. Bear with me. Similarly, there was some talk around the footpath and losing the footpath. Just to make clear, the footpath isn't going to be lost, it's going to be relocated through the site. And again, I understand why the residents might have a preference to be able to go through their back gardens, open their gate and get onto the footpath, but that isn't material. It's about whether or not the relocation of the footpath is acceptable in planning terms. And as I said earlier, that's also subject to a separate process that would need to be gone through if planning permission's granted. There was a question about flooding. Councillor Whiting, I don't have the data as to how far above sea level we are, but we are flood zone 1, so lowest risk of flooding, and it's acceptable on that basis. Bear with me. The other thing I've heard a little bit from members as they went through their questioning was about whether or not this development would be seen as cramped given the quantum and how the site would be laid out. I think what I would ask members to think about as they go through debate on that in particular is, in what way do you think that is cramped? You know, we've come to the conclusion, having assessed against the technical guidance, that there's no overlooking resulting from how those houses would be laid out. There wouldn't be any overshadowing from it, and that overall character-wise that's acceptable when you look at it in terms of the aerial view with what's going on around it. So it's not enough to say you think there are too many on the site, but rather what the consequence of that might be. I think that's it. Thank you. Yeah, only to reiterate what's in the papers really, Chair, that the drainage arrangements as proposed are acceptable. They've been tested by our colleagues in the drainage team, who are the local lead flood authority, and found to be acceptable. So subject to those recommended conditions, there wouldn't be an issue from our perspective in terms of drainage.
Chair, it's just to come back on something that Emma mentioned then. Emma, after the development is completed, do you know if the highways will be adopted by the council, if it will remain the associations to manage the highway?
I don't have that information, I'm afraid. Andy might be able to help though.
It will be adopted.
Andy, I've got another question for you, but I'll do it when we get into debate.
I were expecting it.
Very technically counting with my thumb the number of visitors parking spaces, Councillor Anderson, there would be 11 across the site.
I'd just confirm that there is enough visitor parking throughout the site.
Members will move into debate. Does any member wish to comment on the report or ask any of our officers any questions? Councillor Dennis.
Andy, you're not going to like this question. I live on a neighbourhood estate by Lakeside, and when it's football, we get lots of parking by visitors to football there. It's unadopted at the moment, but it will be adopted by the council. In a similar way, as Councillor Cox has said, when the airport was opened previously, residents there were inundated with people parking for the airport, abandoning their cars on the roads there for a couple of weeks at a time. I could easily foresee this happening with this estate as well, and because it's quite small, the excess parking there could pose more of an issue for future residents. Does the authority have any plans to put in measures to prevent visitor parking from the airport on estates such as this one?
I love that question, by the way, and I am going to keep your gaze throughout this. So, when it comes to parking, then that's a separate issue, totally. And it's more of a holistic approach that's needed. Just one development of 34 houses and implementation of parking restrictions is not the answer. So you have to look at the overall issue. So if there is an issue, then what might be needed is a more stringent policy relating to the airport alone and parking around the airport. At the moment, the roads are not adopted. And that's the other thing that you have to understand, is that they're not adopted. So they can do whatever they want. It's a private road. So there may be issues relating to parking, but whilst ever they're not adopted, we have no responsibility.
Thank you.
Chair, just to kind of elaborate on that a little bit, and it's probably context rather than material to the decision, but because we've got a situation here where we've got a housing association that's retaining ownership of the site, I would imagine that if their residents further down the line start to get on at them about problems they're incurring, then they would have strategies in place to be looking to deal with that. As I say, not material to your decision, but you're in a slightly different position here with the housing association retaining ownership of the site in totality. Thank you.
Yeah, committee, there's been lots of discussion and questions around viability and affordability, and I think it's important to look at the application through the lens of what it is. It's a housing association buying land from a charity to provide affordable housing, which is going to be at around 70% of the rental compared to what the properties in the immediate vicinity are, and to look at the application through that lens as opposed to it being a commercial developer, and viability and affordability through the lens that they would look through. I welcome any other comments and questions from panel members as well, if there's anything you wish to add. Go for it, Councillor Dennis.
Thank you. I'm not sure which officer to address this to. The resident made reference to the back-to-back distances following the extension on her property. If we could get sort of clarity around that.
Yep, so what I would say to that is that there's no requirement for everything on a site plan that's submitted to us to be 100% accurate, because things change. But what we do as officers is go out on the ground and make an assessment as to how those relationships would be. We'll have done that exercise, we'll have seen those features on the ground and made a judgment on that basis. So we wouldn't take on face value the plans that were submitted to us. We do that exercise as part of our assessment.
And so then, with the extension where it is, the back-to-back distances, I take it, are fine from a planning officer's perspective?
Absolutely, yes. So we're happy with all of those distances and maintaining privacy levels throughout. What I would say is that the speaker mentioned there being a statutory requirement to maintain distances. That's not quite the case. It's a policy requirement. So there's always a judgment to be made there. But in this case, the distances are met in an acceptable way, and we're happy with those relationships.
Colleagues, anything further to add? Councillor Anderson?
Yeah, just on the park, there's the 6 2-bed houses, are they one space as well? The 2-bed apartments are one.
Mm-hmm. Yep, so there is some of the 2-bed houses are 1-bed spaces. That's 1-bed. One parking space per unit, yeah. And we've acknowledged in the report that that is slightly below the standard, but we've had it confirmed with Highways that overall, when you look at that level of provision for this site, that's acceptable.
So if I've got my maths, the worst case scenario, there could be 18 cars with nowhere to go, basically.
I'm going to turn to Andy and see if he wants to add anything to that.
We do assess the fact that 2 beds won't necessarily generate 2 cars, and especially when relating it to affordable housing. So you've got to consider it in context to the people that are there. Not that I'm saying that they won't, but experience has told us through housing of similar estates and sizes, then especially housing that we have built, and I say we, the City of Doncaster, we've built, we have got proof of the level of parking for those developments, which I am content that there will be enough. 2 beds apartments only require 1 space. So is it apartments that you are discussing, or houses? I'm not sure, Councillor. Both. So in policy, an apartment only requires 1 space. Yeah, so that's 1 bed or 2 bed or even 3 bed. So when it comes to do 2-bed houses, then we apply in this case, because it is affordable housing, the same principle. When it comes to 3 bedrooms, then we will apply 2 spaces rigidly. So that's our rule of thumb when it comes to affordable housing. Now, that's not particularly set down, but we have to take a practical and reasonable approach at all times, and that's what we do.
So Andy, based on your experience in Doncaster, are you satisfied with the planning application in relation to parking provision?
Yeah, absolutely. There's no issues with the parking provision, both visitor and on plot. So I'm more than content. And we've, like I say, we've got evidence from our own in-house team and a report that they did. And I've asked for, it'd be about 2 years ago, to make sure that we have a report that evidences our decision-making process. So I think it's down Balby, where we've had a survey done, and there was another site as well, which our housing team did. So I'm more than happy with what we've been provided with.
Yeah, I totally appreciate that, yeah, but worst case scenario, technically, there could be 18 cars with nowhere to go.
I could give you the worst case scenario in every development, Councillor Anderson, and it'd be a lot more. So, yeah, you might work on worst case. We've got to have a balance to every development. So, yeah, you're quite entitled to your opinion on that, but we base it on evidence.
Members, any further comments or questions? Councillor Anderson, I'll come to you first, then Glyn, I'll come to you if that's okay. Councillor Dennis.
So it's just because we've got the same first name, don't mean we've got the same second name. Martin. Is it Martin? Hello. I wonder if you can provide some information about the housing makeup that is proposed for this development and the council's view on it.
Yep, certainly, Councillor. We've been working on this project with South Yorkshire Housing Association for probably about 3 or 4 years now. And as rightly said, the number of units was a lot higher to start with. It's now more or less 100% policy compliant from a planning point of view. And over that period of time, we've reduced the number of units on the site to meet the need and demand for the parish of Orkley, which in effect will be the restriction on this planning application if it's approved. So yes, there is only two-bed bungalows, but based on the waiting list data we have and had over the last 3 years, the number of older people that require 2-bed bungalows on the waiting list compared to the amount of families on the waiting list in Orkley and Hayfield Green is a lot lower. Therefore, we've got more 2-bed, 3-bed and some 4-bed houses for larger families across the site. The other thing, just to mention that the 2-bed bungalows location is in an area now where they're not going to be overlooked or overseen or overshadowed. Whereas if they were originally backing onto the houses, the existing houses would have overlooked and overshadowed them. So that's another reason for them being moved elsewhere onto the site as well.
Thank you.
Councillor Whiting?
Yeah, when you're on about vehicles, you're on about an average sized car. Yeah? You know, for parking. For parking.
We work on a large car. When we do, we have an AutoCAD computer package. So we use that as our large car. So we assess parking based upon the provision of that large car parked throughout the site. Now it can be in designated spaces, it can be on the footpath, because what we have also through experience found that you cannot stop footway parking. So what we do is we have a more pragmatic approach and make sure that when a car is parked, and they will park on the footway, there's no getting away from it, that there is enough room for the disabled access to get by, and as well as disabled on about buggies, double buggies. So we always make sure that the large car and the width of a large car is assessed as part of any planning application.
Yeah, I'm more about when I go onto sites like that, there's a lot of these up and back van type thing, because a lot of people work contracting nowadays and they don't have to cause a problem. You know, so if you had an house with two vehicles in it and one of them's one of them, that takes like nearly 1.5 parking spaces, doesn't it? And if they park on curb, that narrows road down.
Yeah, we can't unfortunately have a crystal ball and see what everybody's going to do in terms of parking, so that's why we do have the parking requirements through Appendix 6. So that's the policy we do actually adhere to. I wouldn't necessarily disagree with the vans, but it's difficult to assess each individual house that they may or may not have access to a van. So it is a difficult situation to actually assess. What we do nowadays is make sure that there is enough room on the driveway between the highway boundary and the front of the house that they won't stick out and cause an obstruction on the highway, because that's what we've found when we've gone back and looked at developments from in the teens, that's what's been happening, hence why we're always reviewing parking requirements and indeed the distances that we allow for the driveways.
Yeah, is the width of these roads, is it a standard width, or are they narrower, or what?
Well, I tend to work on the premise of tracking for a refuse vehicle around the site and the developments. So in the past we've found that the refuse vehicle does overrun some of the curbs and footways, and there have been places and developments where they've gone down to 4.8 metres, which is, in my opinion, too narrow. So that's why when I ask for tracking, it's always of a refuse vehicle throughout the site, and it also we also ask that there's no overrun onto the footway. So again, we have within the South Yorkshire Residential Design Guide references to actually the distance that a refuse vehicle can get to the curb, so it doesn't overhang. So that's what we always check when we do these developments.
So you don't foresee any problems with refuse vans then?
No, well, one of the things we also do is consult with Waste and Recycling, Chris Pratt and Esther Mayfield. So whenever there's any development, and especially a cul-de-sac that's potentially over 25 metres reverse-wise, then we will ask them to make sure that they're content with that reverse. So even though they have cameras on the back of the refuse wagons, we still ask them to make sure that they're content, which on this one I know for a fact they will have been consulted.
Members, any other questions or comments? Okay, is there a proposal to grant planning permission subject to the imposition of planning conditions and a Section 106 agreement. Is there a mover for the recommendation? I'll move it. Is there a seconder, please? Thank you, Councillor. Can we move to a vote, please? And can you show by indicate by hand those for? Those against? 2. And those abstaining? So that's passed. Thank you, committee. And thank you for attending as well today and speaking. Sorry. We're just going to adjourn the meeting for 2 minutes.
If everybody's ready to start. Are we ready to start, everybody? Thank you, everybody. Item 6, appeal decisions. The report is for information only. Does any member wish to speak on this item? Can I ask that a committee member move that the report be noted? Seconder. Thank you. That's been approved. Item 7, planning enforcement quarterly report, quarter 3, December 2025. The report is for information only. Does any member wish to speak on this item? Can I ask that a committee member move that the report be noted? Moved, seconded. Members, ladies and gentlemen, that concludes the business at today's meeting. I would like to thank everyone for their attendance and input. I now declare the meeting closed. Thank you.